This interview with Stacy Taylor was, I have to say, one of my favorite interviews. It was so touching. I think I had tears in my eyes just about the whole time. My whole body was alive because we spoke from a soul level. It was beautiful to hear somebody who truly, truly has dropped into their soul experience and the dramatic impact it's had in his life and what that is doing to this for the community, for society. He is supporting men in this journey as well. He's supporting men to be able to access these parts of themselves and in that way heal these deep, deep, deep wounds that so many men carry. And it was just such a touching story, and he shared so vulnerably. So I really, really am looking forward to sharing this very, very powerful podcast interview with you. Welcome to Soul Chats, the podcast where I delve into the depth of human experience and explore what it is to be a human as we embark on a journey of self-discovery, reflection, and meaningful conversations that truly nourish the spirit. From profound insights to heartwarming stories, each episode is truly a sanctuary for your soul. Get ready to be inspired and connect with the essence of who we truly are. This is Soul Chats. So
She's so
yeah, so
right.
thanks so much. So like I just from what I've heard and what I've seen and the interviews you've done with some of my peers and things like that, I'm just like, oh, I'd love to get a little bit more insight into how that story, how this unfolded and how your journey took part. So over to you to share with us.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. So, yeah, like what you just shared there, I never in a million years thought I'd be someone who would be on a journey of helping men heal and come into alignment with who they really are. I was just reflecting on this about a week ago. If somebody had to come to me with this kind of work and said this is what you were doing, or even said I needed to go on a personal journey of healing 3 or 4 years ago, I would have been the guy that laughed and probably made fun of them.
Right.
It just was not something that growing up as a Kiwi male, growing up in a lot of physical, mental, and verbal abuse, it was just be hard and get it done. That was kind of the template that I took on for life. But 4 years ago, life brought me to a place where I just had this realization. My wife left me. Was just after COVID had happened. Same sort of for you. Woke up one day, my wife left me. My health was a mess. My finances were a mess. My relation, everything was an absolute mess. And I remember sitting in my sunroom just at the back here, and I didn't even know about healing. I didn't know about the ego. I knew nothing of this stuff, Wendy. And I remember sitting there so angry. There was just this anger inside of me that, man, you're a good guy. Why is it that you can create your life to an incredible place and then out of nowhere, it's like you blow it up? And then as I sat there, the ego kicked in and it was like, fuck her, fuck everyone, just go back to, get to the grind, stop being a sookie bubba, stop being a pussy and go after it. And I was like, right, that's what I'm going to do. And literally after I said that, Wendy, this voice dropped in that said, stop, there's something you can't see. And I've even got goosebumps saying it. And
Yeah.
I was like, what the? It was so clear. And now I look back and it was just God speaking to me. And I'm not religious. Part of the reason I didn't want to go anywhere near healing is my father and mother were mild, not alcoholics, but heavy drinkers. There was a lot of physical abuse. And one day my parents became religious and they replaced the bottle with the Bible. So that's what I thought spirituality was, Wendy.
Mm.
And so there was so much pain in my house about having to go to church and living under the rule of the Bible under my father's enforcement. So that's what I thought spirituality was. And I couldn't even say the word God until probably 6 or 8 weeks ago, where I don't have to say universe anymore. I just say God.
Mhm.
And so in that sunroom, I just heard this voice, and that voice created just enough space for me to start looking at the truth of my life beyond the stories of the lies that I'd unconsciously created. And I was like, man, you've done this same pattern 7 or 8 times. And I'm like, and I was like, what? You actually have. You get your life, your marriage, your finances, your health, your friendships to an incredible place. And then something happens and you self-sabotage it and end up back here. And then that quote dropped in that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And I was like, I just sat there and I was like, everything I've ever thought, everything I've ever been taught, everything I've ever believed is a lie. And I sat there and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, but I just made a vow that day that I'm not going to do the same things and I'm going to allow something to come in that may lead me on a different journey. And a week later, I went on Facebook and a guy that I was following at the time through sports fitness, he posted up about this breath workshop and he had this list of, are you struggling with this? And I'm like, yep. And I'm like, that's all me. So I messaged him and signed up, and that's what really led me on the journey, Wendy, of healing and moving more into my soul's purpose and coming into alignment as a man.
That's freaking amazing. Like when you said that about the voice and that, I'd almost had tears in my eyes because I could just feel the divinity in what you just said. You can feel it. And that's so profound. However, like again, also that you were obviously really ready to hear it because that voice might have been there once of those other times that you did that.
As I look back on my life, as I've gone on the journey of, it's a revelatory process, a process of revelation. I've seen there was many times that the opportunity was there for me, but I wasn't ready. And that time I was ready. And that voice I'll never forget because that voice comes in a lot now.
Mm.
And it's come in many times on my journey. And it was such a scary thing as a man that comes from this hard physical background of men are men and you don't show emotions and that. It was the scariest thing that I've ever had to do to go on a journey that was so unknown, that had so much uncertainty for me.
What do you think is the scariest part?
For me, the unknown. So I reached out to this guy, Sandro. I signed up for his workshop and I was pretty excited because I was like, well, I've found something different. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go do this 6 week program and all my problems will be sorted and life will be back to, this was the story going on in my head. So I had to drive up to Hamilton and I remember going up, I think it was on a Wednesday evening. And all the way up, I was like, pretty excited, a little bit of nervous, but more excited. Got there, jumped out of the car, went to walk through the doors, Wendy, at the building where he was hosting it. And as I opened the doors and looked in, so Sandro was a male, there were 6 other women and no other men.
Oh, wow.
And I just remember stopping in the doorway like, fuck,
You didn't expect that.
what have you done? Because I knew nothing about healing. I didn't know it wasn't a thing that men did and I
Yeah.
actually shut the door and started walking out. I'm like, you can have my money, I'm out. And he
Yeah.
he must have caught me out of the corner of his eye and he came out and he said, what are you up to? And I told a little lie, I forgot something in the car. And anyway, he managed, I was like, oh, well, I can't get out of it now. Went in and I'm like, oh no, my mind's like, how can I get out of this? What can I say? And he said, oh, well, we'll go through to the room where I'm facilitating the workshop. And as we walked in and sat down, the minute I sat on the chair like this, Wendy, the voice in my head said, he's going to ask you first. He knows you and you're the only man and he's going to ask you first why you're here. And my head was down like this, no lies. And under my breath was just, please don't ask me. Just please don't ask anyone but me. And he goes, well, let's get into it. Stacy, what brought you here? And my heart sunk. And the analogy I share is, like on the cartoons with the little devil. The little
Yeah.
devil was on my shoulder. The ego, which I now understand at a deeper level, was like, fuck, don't tell them the truth, man. Just tell them this is going on, or tell them that's going on, and this and that. And it was like, it felt like I was sitting there for 5 minutes, but it was only a few seconds. And then I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And then that same voice that came in the sunroom said, if not now, then when? And I just took a second and I told the truth for the first time in my life about what was really going on in my life as a man. And I cried in front of these women, in front of Sandro, and I just told the truth without holding anything back for the first time in my life. And the freedom that came from that was, I can't describe it. It was like the weight of the world. And it's not until you let go of the weight of the world that you realize the weight of the world was lifted.
Yeah.
And as I sat there and shared and just let it go, and no one said nothing, no one looked at me funny, no one, like, I just felt so free. And then the next lady beside me goes, I've got stage 4 cancer. My husband's cheated on me, and I've got 2 little girls, and I'm fighting for my life. Now I'm crying for them. And the next lady goes, I've gone through and tried to, and they went around the circle, Wendy. And for the first time, I'm like, oh, it's not just me. And then
Yeah.
the realization came in that they have no time to worry about what's going on for me.
Yeah.
They've all got their own battles. And that was a very special day because it cracked open the journey that's led me to where I am now.
Wow. And I mean, it's again like what we said right in the beginning of this conversation of once we let go of what we think the path should look like and we finally surrender, and it doesn't always need to be on such a painful way if we just surrendered, if we just learned what soul aligned living and living in harmony with God,
Yeah.
that it's a fascinating thing to unpack because there's so much there. On the one hand, there is the concept of each individual human being, what it looks like when we truly live in alignment with soul, when we live in alignment with God, when we let go and let God,
Mm.
And then there is also in your story in particular the hugely challenging comeback for a Kiwi male. It's it's changing. It definitely is changing, which is fantastic, and it's so powerful that people like you and others are leading that change in such a real way. It's real people sharing real stories on real change. And however, I know that is, God, that's the hardest thing, like the bravery of you to even go to the breathwork session. But I can sympathize and understand that you must have walked in there, go, oh, God, I didn't think about the fact that I might probably be the only guy here. And so what sort of happened after that? Like, did you obviously you had an amazing breakthrough, even just going there, even before the breath work?
Yeah, so the going there was huge. That whole 6 week journey gave me an understanding of why my life had gone the way it had gone. So,
Yeah.
those journeys, and you'll know about them, but they took me back to show me parts of my past that I'd forgotten, and the way that I'd seen the way that I'd or taken these things on, and the meaning that I'd given to them, and the negative meaning that I'd given about myself. And they revealed to me all of the hurt and the heartache and the pain that was going on under the surface that I didn't know was still there. And we carried on the journey. I came out of the 6 week program and thought, yeah, that's it. I'm healed. And then life took me down another bit of a rough path where I got hit by a tree in the bush and nearly killed. And I
Oh,
had to leave that industry, which looking back now was a blessing too. So I'd been tree falling and running clothing businesses and doing all of these things for years and never been hit or hurt by a tree. I'd had some injuries, but I got hit really bad and was forced to. I look back now and I realize it could have been way worse, but it was God saying, you're not meant to be in there anymore. And
mm.
then that led me into a bit of another dark hole. And then I remember Sandro putting up, he wanted to film a couple of sessions to promote his work, and he was looking for one man and one woman. And like that same voice come in and said, reach out. And I was like, oh, no, you probably want someone new. But I reached out, and then that took me, we went and filmed a couple of sessions, one normal breath work and one a rebirthing in the warm water. And that took me back to the womb, Wendy. And I seen that my mother didn't want me. She wanted a girl, and that cracked open another whole can of
Did you not
worms.
know that, like in
I
life?
I had no clue. I
Wow,
had
that's
no
so
clue.
powerful to
Yeah,
have that realization. Like, this is the sort of work that I truly, truly love. And I know, like, it's a more challenging uh, work to access for people. However, this is where I feel these dramatic shifts happen because there is this energetic coding that we carry, and the when we psychologically try and figure it out and we go to counseling and talk about our childhood, that's an intellectual analysis of something practical that's
yeah,
externally makes sense or doesn't make sense. Like it was a messy house, or I got hit, or they fought. It's those are some aspects, but that's not the problem. That's not
no,
the problem. There is this energetic component. It's like if they were fighting, that's not the point. It's like what happened in you that set something in place. And what I think is really powerful, that that's a whole other rabbit hole. But that whole concept of the fact that the in the womb your mother wanted a girl,
yeah,
and what that did on an energetic imprint has created a pathway, even a subtle pathway that we can't figure out by sitting in the counselor's office talking about our childhood, because that's not going to come up like that. Not if
yeah,
she didn't actually verbalize it. It was just something. So
yeah.
what happened for you when you had that intrinsic knowing, like you had that experience of knowing that?
So we jumped in the spa pool to do the session. So those who don't know, you're floating upside down in a similar temperature water to the womb. And even I was like, this is fucked.
And you're
Like
doing
I
breath
was,
work in that
yeah, you're doing
environment.
breath work through a snorkel and you're
Oh,
floating
what? Oh,
through,
wow.
right? And so even I'm like, this is cooked, man. Like you've gone way too far. But that was actually the blessing because there was no expectations. And this was being filmed by a professional crew. And they had, it was like they weren't there, but they were there. And so 45, 50 minutes into the session, I felt this jolt and flashed back to the womb, and I seen my soul coming into my body, Wendy. And I seen my mother rejecting me, even though she didn't know her fear was having a boy. She was rejecting me, and I seen a moment where my soul had the choice to come into that body or to go back to God, and I chose to come in. And then through in the womb, my mother was rejecting me the whole time. And this is crazy. The energy she held back from me was life force, which actually I seen that energy going up her spine that created the brain tumor that ultimately took her life.
Oh my God.
And
Yes.
so this happened. And the reason I share it with you is once the grieving process, so once it cracked, Sandra had to flip me up and I must have released emotionally for 15 minutes and this 20 minutes in the spa pool just broken. And we literally sat in the spa pool and filmed this, and I told him this straight out of the session. This was so vivid. It was the most vivid thing. So much so that my mother already had the name she'd picked out for the girl, which was Stacy. And
Mm.
that name, as a young Kiwi guy growing up, a young Kiwi boy, has been the root of so much pain, suffering, teasing, attacking.
Wow.
And so it shattered my reality with a sledgehammer, Wendy. And the last
Yeah.
few years have been able to work through that, heal that within myself, find understanding of the meaning that I gave to it, which is I don't matter, which forms abandonment, and how I was addicted to not being loved, basically. That deprivation was what I received from my mother. So I kept recreating deprivation in every area of my life unconsciously until I was able to heal this and actually step beyond it.
My God, that is so, 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 so powerful. And what I think is really amazing about this is that that's not necessarily accessible for everybody. However, it is that those real acknowledgements of there is so much more, and that understanding of trying to rationalize and intellectualize where we're at and even the traumas and the life journey, and to rationalize things, and is going to get you only so far.
Yeah.
And that's powerful. So do you, I know that you share breathwork practices with people. Is that your main modality you work with?
It was, but it's evolved so much beyond that. So what I found is I got trapped after I seen that, Wendy. I got trapped because I felt it.
Mm,
I was able to feel it. I was able to release it. And, there's a lot in the spiritual healing world now that if you feel it, you heal it. But I found myself even more trapped after that. My life got worse. And it wasn't until I started to realize that there had been an impact in the psyche. And so you were talking there about traditional counselors and healing. When the counselor is talking to you, that is your ego that is responding.
mm.
Now, your ego is defending the hurt and is also protecting the true self. And so, what I started to learn, Wendy, is as I started working with people, I would listen to their language. And I'm like, their language is very primal. They're speaking in a past tense, they're speaking from the third person. And so I started to pick up these patterns in the language and then started to pick it up in myself. And then I realized there's these psychological programs that, yes, we need to go back and release the energy, and that will crack open and start the revelation process into the truth. But until you can actually see what you've been doing to yourself through the psychological program, you can't be free. So I use breath work because it takes men out of their head and it cracks them open. And then as they crack open, then I can actually work with them around showing them the psychological programs that are running that I am able to pick up through language and then ask questions for them to come back and find the truth of their own answers.
My God, it's so powerful, and you articulate it so well. It is amazing. It's so awesome. It's exactly what I mean about having got to the concept of, like, with all the rabbit holes I've gone down and all the modalities I share and all the different things. It's like the ultimate outcome is just soul alignment. It's just like living from soul. However, that's an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing, for want of a better word, vigilance to the programming coming back, or picking up a new program, or like, yes, I've discovered that programming, that's a program I was running, and that's an old story. And like you say, you had that moment which cracked you open. And it's interesting because it had that huge psychological impact, because really what's happened is now you're not who you thought you were, and everything's a lie, and now you've got to start from the beginning and rebuild the concept, which is a concept, or the alignment with who you really are then.
Yeah.
That's huge.
And here's the biggest trip about this whole thing. I thought all of my trauma was with my dad.
Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah.
somebody had said you've got trauma with your mum, even though she went through her brain tumor and a horrific journey, I would have said no way. But I thought it was all the physical and mental abuse of my father. That was a part of it, but the biggest wound that impacted my life started in the womb,
Yeah.
and it was with my mother. And the gift that she gave me is the gift of unconditional love. But I had to reveal to myself that for myself by actually being able to go back and realize that I was addicted to deprivation, that my template of love was deprivation because my mum didn't want me. She couldn't give to me. She was unavailable mentally, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. So once we form the template of love, whatever it is, we're going to recreate that in our adult life until we can see it, reveal it by facing the ego, stripping away what we're not, and coming back to our authentic self, which is love. And
Mm,
now that I understand, and even just sharing that with you, the goosebumps that come because it's a process, and it's a process that has to unfold. You may think you're ready. Every part of you is, but there's a part of you that still isn't. And even over the last few weeks, I've had massive parts of this journey that have revealed themselves. And I'm getting to the point where I feel like for the first time in my life, I know what it's like to live without trauma, Wendy.
wow. And that is such a good point because it is great that in the mainstream, and right now trauma is a buzzword for want of a better word as well, but it is because it does give us um, an opportunity to see that trauma, like Gabor Mate says, big T, little t, it's not always the obvious. And one thing that struck me with the concept with your mother is, like you said, she taught me unconditional love, and it's like this knowing, this soul knowing, like there is this soul awareness, there's this soul journey happening, and then there is a human experience happening.
Mm.
And your human has all the information that's been given to it. So the human is looking and going, well, my mother loves me. I can tell by her behavior, and I can tell that she's doing all these things. So my mother loves me. I have unconditional love. Yet there is this niggle, there is this schism, there is this something that's intuitively saying, something's not right.
Yeah.
And so and that creates, like, there is no answer there because there's nothing you can say that says that she doesn't love you, because look at all the behavior. It's unconditional love. And she taught me that. Yet having had that experience is like, on a deeper soul level, she didn't want me in that experience. And I knew that. I knew that.
Yeah.
And,
This is
and
the day that my life changed, was seeing my soul. Like, I'm in the spa pool. This is a split second of like going back to see it clearly, like watching a movie.
yeah.
I seen my soul come to the body, and I could see the rejection because it was dark and black. And I looked back to the heavens and I said, I'm going in. And that was the day I realized I chose betrayal and rejection as my life's journey as the soul.
Oh my God, I love it. It's so
Right?
powerful.
So you spoke something so powerfully there. As a child, I thought what my mother was giving me was love. Once I seen that lie, that my mum didn't want me, I realized that my mum was holding resentment to me every day she looked at me my entire life
Mm,
until a week before she died. So as a child, I have to form a connection with my mother or I will not survive. So the connection that I formed with my mother, which I thought was love, was resentment,
mm,
was betrayal, was guilt and shame. And that was my template of love. And so I
mm,
attracted in people, partners, and circumstances that created the same experience that I lived as a child because it was familiar.
mm.
And I would recreate it because the minute I felt true love, that was scary.
Yeah.
The ego wholeness is scary to the ego, so the
Yeah.
ego would self-sabotage. I thought I was just At the end, I just thought I was a failure, doomed to fail
Mm,
as a man. Like, fuck, I can get it there, but I can never hold it. I actually started to give up on life. And it wasn't until I started to break this down and go through this experience. They talk about the phoenix burning to the ground to be reborn. That is what the journey of life is for a human being, moving
mm.
from your ego to your soul. And it's not about the modern world has this idea that we need to become something. Like
Yeah.
all the modern day coaches, motivational, inspirational coaches, you've got to become something. No, you don't. You have to unbecome everything that you've put in front of your true self.
Wow, that's the sound bite there. Absolutely. And that is like scary in itself, because what are we if we're not something?
Once all of that broke in me, there was this abyss of who am I? And I was latching on to, I'll go back to this old way of being. This is what I'm going to create. Soon as I went down that path, it was like God said, nope, nope. But like you said, there's the soul, the ego, and the human animal, and the ego. And that's all we know. So we want to keep defaulting back to that. And then there's the soul that's saying, you've hopped on the roller coaster and you're not getting off until until we know that you are now in alignment, that you've individuated from your childhood wounding and you've become undivided. You're now in wholeness, you're now in integrity, and you've dealt with all the wounding and all the programming. And life, it's interesting because the last part of the journey that I've been working through right now is some stuff with my wife. And we went through a big process over the last few days, and on the weekend, I was finally able to catch the trigger, see
Mm.
what was happening through the programming, and release it. And it literally changed my marriage like that
Yeah.
because it changed my internal frequency. I took the walls of resentment down around my heart, which then were mirrored back through her, and this just overflowing love that came out. But this is a process. Like, this is 4 years of, like, people don't realize the level of work that I've put in to get here. And now I understand why, because I see so many men seeking, like wounded boys, the love they never got from their mother, the love they never
Mm.
got from their father. And the minute they get it, they don't want it and they push it away and they just keep looping around. And, even this morning, so there was a huge release for us yesterday. And I've never slept so well in the last 2 or 3 years as I did last night because the
Wow.
energetics of that release from my being,
Yeah.
and as the energetics released, my whole being said, "You're safe, you're okay, you're
Wow.
free." So
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good word, the freedom. And I think that's the biggest thing that people um, haven't experienced. So it's scary to go down that road. And like you say, the work you've done is insane, and a lot of people wouldn't be able to do it in 4 years. I mean, that's a short time to go through such a, huge journey of, burning down the phoenix and rise of the phoenix. But the thing that, like, what the concept of, like, when you went to open that door to the breathwork session and realized, oh shit, and you want to close the door and go back. That's how it is for people when they have those little glimpses. They do a breathwork session, one breathwork session, they go, oh shit. And then they go, oh, I can't come next week. Or they go to a one-on-one session and you touch on something and they've had this little moment of insight and they go, oh shit. And then they again go, no, I'm good,
yeah,
And and I think because they have never experienced what freedom feels like, what true freedom feels like. So it's almost like that institutionalized person or the captive who doesn't know they're captives, and they're like, they don't realize how imprisoned and how limited that they are because they have never known any different. And it's scary if you open the door and let them and invite them to walk out, because you can't drag them out, you know.
that's, you use some beautiful language there because I call them prisons of the mind,
Yeah.
prison or program, right? The prison is there, but the doors are open.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you don't realize you're in a prison because you have
Yeah.
conscious free choice, but you're actually in a prison. When I seen the prisons that I was in, and they form in language, right? So there'll be things like, I don't matter, I'm not loved, I'm not enough, I'm not safe, I can't trust. There's these negative language forms, the prisons, but we can't see them because they're unconscious. They happen when we were in the womb, they happen when we were 4 years old or 5 years old. And we maladapted a behavior in order to survive, and then the ego protects those prisons because whatever you form your template of love and connection, your attachment style, the opposite of that is terrifying to the ego.
Mm.
All right. So for me and for all of us, what happens is we're going to attract in a partner that's going to give us the temporary absence of our childhood wounding so we can feel like what wholeness feels like.
Mm.
But after that honeymoon period, which they call it the honeymoon period, once that starts to fracture and break apart, now you're forced. Most men are looking to try and get it back from the woman, but God's showing you what wholeness looked like, and for you to actually go inside and heal that and realize that you were the source of what you seek. You've
Mm.
just forgotten it. This is why when men break up in relationships, they try to get it back from their wife first off. But
Mm.
now you're moving from fear. So once that's triggered, you see, when a man comes in and there's the temporary absence of his childhood woundings, he's got the temporary wholeness, which is love. So he's given, he's open, and what he's giving, he's receiving. Then something triggers the childhood wounding, which now brings in the ego, which is moving from lack or scarcity. So now he's closed off trying to get back what he feels like he's lost when if he only could realize that he was the generator of it and all he has to do is go inside and heal what was in the way of that, that he'll get that back. But what happens is men try to get it back off their woman. If they can't get it from her, eventually they'll move to their children. And the reason they move to their children, Wendy, is their children are unconditional love. Your children can't hurt you, they can't leave you, and they need you. But eventually they're going to become teenagers and you're going to be faced with the same prison or the same hell. And that's really what happened for me. I didn't realize I'd moved from my wife to my children. And then when my youngest son left home, the same pattern come around, but there was nowhere to hide anymore.
Mm. Mm-hmm. And it's how do you support men in that journey? Because I'm sure that, as we know, there are some pretty challenging stories out there and some really tightly wound generational stories that are just repeated time and time again. So to be the generational circuit breaker and to be the one to go against even their own, story and their own ego, how do how do you even get through to them? Like, where do you start?
So the first place I started, I don't try to change anything.
Mm,
I don't, I was of the mindset for many years that you should get a coach that can motivate you and inspire you to create the life that you want. But I realized motivation, you need a motive.
hmm
That's the ego driving you, right? So the ego works in negation. The language is negation. It's always negative. So if
mm,
you're trying to become something, it's usually a reaction to feeling like you're a nobody. And so what I do, Wendy, is I don't try to change their life. I don't try to fix their relationship. I don't try to change their finances or their health or stop their addiction. I help them see the truth.
mm,
I help them face the false identity, and it's brutal and it hurts and it's painful. And you're going to have to go through a grieving process and it can take time. But once you deal with the grief, I just shared this in a video. At the ultimate level, all we need to feel is all of the sadness.
mm,
So once you deal with the grief of the loss, you'll no longer keep recreating the loss, which is God trying to help you to deal with the loss that you haven't dealt with. So I just help people deal with or help men face the loss in a way that they can do it in a way that works for them. But once they start cracking open, and they get a little bit of insight like I do, and they realize, man, that path's the lie and this path's the truth. But we're humans, we still pull back. I just help them break down the lies of their ego through a process that I've developed.
I think one thing too is the idea of community and, like, like a tribe, and especially men, there's that sort of tribal kind of gathering. And one thing that I really notice is I've seen that a lot. There's almost a trauma bonding. There's almost like this banter. They love the banter and they don't go very deep. Often it's like bantering, but the banter can even be painful. It's like just being mean to each other and sort of like having digs at each other. However, there is a feeling of love in that as well, because they're like, oh, I'm bonded, and yeah, I got picked on tonight, but at least they noticed me. At least I was the one they got picked on, so I must be the favorite,
Yeah.
And so it's like, and there is this sort of a dysfunctional way of feeling connected. I've seen it in, like, certain groups, and then they love to, they're really quite ritualistic about it. Like, okay, every Friday night we get together, we have some drinks, we banter, we talk about the same things, we tease the same person, or maybe it's a different person this time, and then there's a feeling of bonding in that, even though it's painful and there's no depth.
Yeah. It's interesting you share this. So I run a men's retreat. It's probably 6 months ago now. And I just had the same voice said, make it a week.
Yeah.
So I booked a week out at this incredible lodge out Tauranga, out no cell phone coverage in the bush. It was like off the grid and it was very primal. And it's the very first night they came, that's exactly what was there. And the second night and the third night. By the fourth night, they bared their souls. They put the mask down and they cried, or they let go of, and they started to share the truth of their life. And it was the most incredible thing to witness. That is the part of you that's in survival. If I'm lighthearted, if I project, if I have banter, if I attack, if I receive, I don't have to face myself. Now, banter is a powerful thing for me in any way once you can be truthful with it. But we've got so many masks on that we don't know we've got on, that it took me 3 full days of putting these guys through physical, mental, and emotional challenges for them to realize that I'm safe here, that I can let go, and no one's going to judge me, and everyone's going to support me, and I can actually speak the truth of what's going on in my life, in my
Mm.
marriage, with my health, with my addictions, and I can grieve it and let it go. And the bond that came after that was brotherhood.
Mm.
The bond that came on that very last day where we sat and we just wrapped it up, and every man got up, and it was guys that were like hugging, that were like, I'm
Mm.
giving
Yeah,
you a
yeah,
hug,
yeah.
but I
Like
don't
a
want to.
fist
There was
pump on the
guys,
back of this.
yeah, there was guys that were like, fuck, like this, and that's another thing that's missing in the world right now is I think there's a stat out there that 97% of men don't have one man that they could call on after 8 p.m. without fear of them not being supported.
Wow.
And this is what's also ruining relationships, because men are taking all their shit to their woman and being all vulnerable. And that, if you want to destroy your relationship, your marriage, go take all your shit to your woman and be vulnerable. And there's a lot of in the spiritual community saying men need to be vulnerable and open and share all their shit. Don't do that. Take it to a man or a coach that you can trust, and then be vulnerable in the right ways.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is your grandmother dies and you break down and your wife holds you,
Yeah.
right? It isn't, I'm going through all my emotional trauma. Can you hold me and hold space for me? That's not what our women are for. And that was
Yeah.
another lesson that I learned on my journey, that, we have to be careful in this new spiritual world, because there's a lot of spiritual fuckery, I call it.
So true. And it's the interesting thing because the roles, see, what I really feel from that conversation of the guys bantering and not breaking down, it's like it took that long to feel like they're always, there's this fear of rejection. Like
Yeah,
there's so much rejection for men, so much. Like rejection is almost the thing, like
yeah,
because when we talk about the way that women talk about like men coming on to them or something, and then they're like, "Whoa," they're all negative about it. However, the men is already coming with this mindset of rejection,
yeah,
and then there is like, I'm not going to go to my mate and talk because I'm already coming in with my fear of rejection. And
yeah,
so this fear of rejection is huge in men. And so that place, like you said, once they knew they were safe, they knew they weren't going to be rejected. And even for you in that breathwork session, that first session where you opened up and you went, oh, hang on, I'm not being rejected. Like, how unusual that I'm
yeah,
not being rejected. I mean, you were rejected by your mom, you were rejected by your dad. Like men so often are rejected for not being enough. You're not manly enough, or you're not this enough, or you're not providing enough, or you're not vulnerable enough, and so there's so much rejection. And so what a powerful thing. And like you say, to be able to come into a group of men and from a masculine perspective, share in vulnerability in that environment, be received by the masculine. It's a different thing to being received by the feminine.
yeah,
It's a different thing. And like you say, to integrate that before you go to your woman.
yeah, yeah. So a man's deepest fear is being exposed. That's that at the core of it, a man's deepest fear is being exposed, being exiled from the tribe, and at a subconscious level, that would equal death.
Yeah.
So that can be abandonment, that can be rejection, that can be betrayal. But if we expose ourselves as men, then we can't be exposed. And so once we start exposing
Oh,
ourselves
that's
to
so
our own
powerful.
lies, which once somebody, people tell me the most deepest, darkest stuff now, Wendy, and I don't even bat an eyelid because it doesn't trigger me. And once a man, I was working with a client a week ago, and I knew what was coming up, and I said, "What's the one thing you don't want anyone to know?" And the minute I said that, I seen the fear come over him. And he was
Mm.
like, I can't tell you, I can't tell you, I can't tell you. Then he told me.
Mm.
And he looked at me for a response, and I was like, well, there it is. And the freedom that came, but the ego believes if you're exposed on this one thing or these multiple of things that the ego's put a story around, that people are going to view you differently and you'll be abandoned, you'll be cast out of the tribe and you'll die. But once you start realizing that the more I expose myself for the lies of my own making from my ego, the freedom ensues. It's just a natural state because I move that dense energy out of my body, right? Enlightenment is I'm just moving the shadow or the denseness out of it. And then my quantum physics, my frequency changes. And when my frequency changes, my frequency is what I will frequently see. Life's a mirror, it's not a window.
Beautiful. God, you've got good words. And the thing is, what that speaks to, and this goes a bit more into the more sort of, higher realms concept, is it's always there. And I believe truly that we have shifted. We are in a different world. There is a different frequency. We are in a higher vibration. The whole conversation around 5D, there is a higher frequency that we are existing in. And what that comes with is that there is more exposure.
Mm,
There is more exposure because, in example, your whole life on a soul level, on a deep, deep intrinsic level, you knew around your mother. We were living in a more dense reality so that you were still in living in that concept that was still influencing your relationship. And all the people, like the men you're talking about, who don't want to be exposed, they are already that thing that they don't want to expose is already influencing everything, because on a soul level, on an energetic level, we know everything about each other.
yeah,
We, on a soul level, we can feel the resonance, we can feel the truth, the integrity or not, we can feel. And especially as more and more and more people are waking up to their own frequency, energy, and the whole shift that's happening, because as we're shifting, there is a higher awareness of the vibration. So now those subtle things, like sometimes, like if you are a bit more intuitively connected, we all know it's like, I don't know about that guy. Oh, there's something off. There's
yeah,
something off. It's got a nice talk. He sounds like a nice guy, seems like a nice guy, but something's off. So that thing that doesn't want to be exposed is being exposed anyway.
yeah,
And of course, if we're in our own shit, we can't hear or feel that subtlety. So we get involved. People get involved with people they don't really want to be involved with because they're not hearing it, they're not
yeah.
feeling it. They're probably of the same resonance. Their own trauma is similar. And so, like you say, the more we are brave enough to truly expose ourselves to ourselves, then we can walk much more openly. There is nothing like what's there to hide when you're in your own truth. And we are at a resonance of authenticity. So we're only going to be experienced in an authentic way. So you can't, if you're being rejected, you can't be rejected because you're not rejecting yourself.
That's exactly it. You couldn't have put it any more perfect than that. When I realized that for 42 years I'd never been the conscious creator of my life, it was like someone hit me with a bat. I
Mm,
thought I was, but I never was because the ego was a negation to the true programming. So I was creating my childhood over and over again by trying not to create it. And I always say that life will draw it out of you like poison from a wound unless you go and face it. So everyone right now that's not consciously doing the work, life's going to draw it out of you like poison from a wound, and it is
ah,
going to be
so true. There's
painful.
going to be some trees falling on people.
Yeah. And life will keep bringing back to you the same loss that you're trying to avoid feeling over and over and over again until you face it, release it, and change your frequency, right? And
Mm,
what it is it's coming back to your authentic self, the parts of yourself that you abandoned, rejected, or betrayed as a way of surviving your childhood. And for me, the main one was betrayal, right? Betrayal of my mother. Then recreating the whole theme of my life was betrayal, Wendy. Once I looked back and seen the truth, the whole theme of I thought it was rejection, but it was actually betrayal. Right? The
mm,
betrayal of the needs of that I needed met by my mother. So monkey see, monkey do. Whatever your childhood was like, it's the known, and you will recreate it by trying not to recreate it over and over again. And this is where your freedom has to come. But what happens is most people, it gets so painful and so scary to change, they then just start to numb out, go to addictions, go to vices, shut down and accept. Then you're dying anyway. And
Yeah.
that is a very slow, like I said, life drawing out of you like poison from a wound. And
Wow.
you've got to choose what you want. Do you want your kids to see that? Do you want your children to see you as a husband and a wife dying?
Mm,
Do you want that? Because they're going to take that and they're going to create it, because you're going to try to get them to be different, but they're going to create what you are. They're going to create the environment that they grew up in. And this was what really made me realize it was no longer about me, Wendy, was that
wow.
when I seen the truth, I realized, well, even though my kids were teenagers, I can go, well, I can let them deal with it, or I can be a man and take responsibility for this and accountability. Yes, feel and grieve my hurt and my pain, but as a man, take accountability and responsibility to put it right for me and my children. And that's what we have to do as men. And when you realize it's no longer about you, men, you won't be afraid to step into any space.
Wow. That's powerful, though. That's powerful. And that's kind of almost sometimes it feels like that's what men are looking to be. However, they're not from that way. They're enforcing it, or they're actually not that powerful, but they're using aggression, or they're using power as opposed to powerful empowerment.
Yeah. So true masculinity is led from love.
Mm,
Masculinity, as it's portrayed in the world right now, is coming from fear.
beautiful. That's so true. What a beautiful thing. And I do feel like that's where we're moving to. I mean, the fact that you're on this journey and it's being received and needed, and there's so much out there now. There's so much more out there. There's so many powerful men that are sharing and supporting. What is next on your mission? Like, what can you see happening this year?
Um, Up until yesterday, I didn't actually know, because there was still a lot I was working through. But for me, Wendy, what I realized is that when a man can take down the walls around his heart, which is by facing the sadness, it's facing the anger, the resentment, the guilt, the shame, the humiliation, that there's so much love available, not only for you once you realize you're the generator of it as a man, and you can't lose love, you can only lose awareness of it.
Mhm.
That what you pour into your woman and children, you can't lose it. That's the illusion. Like the freedom I felt in the last 24 hours through just having that realization and that awareness. And so, really, that's what I want for men. Because I realize if we heal men, we can heal the world. The world. Because if a man is safe, then the woman and children in this world can be safe to express, to be open, to be soft, to be, that love that fuels a man. But until we get our men right, we're going to be spinning the wheels and going in the wrong direction. So even as just you asked that question, is that's the direction that I want to go this year, and it's deep, profound change that men can actually heal and come back to that space of unconditional love for the world.
Oh my God. That is one hell of a mission, and it's so, so, so worthy. It's amazing. Oh my God, thank you so much. That was like I was in tears just about the whole time. That was amazing. That was real soul conversation. That really was. I appreciate you and what you're doing. And I know that this is going to be a huge year, because not only it's so needed, and what you're doing is profound, and you're obviously on a calling, but also because the world is ready for it, and you've got the support of the shift that's happening, the need for this, and it's just inevitable that this is going to touch many, many people's lives. So profound and amazing. So thank you so much for sharing your journey and your wisdom.
Thanks for having me on, Wendy. That's why I love these conversations, because I love speaking to people like yourself that are on the journey, that are expanding, that are growing. And I felt it too. I felt emotions coming up, and I felt the goosebumps as we were talking and we are speaking the truth into the subject, and to be able to just for me as a man, not always express them, but feel them.
Mm.
Just be in that sensation and not be afraid of that sensation, but also not let it control me and overwhelm me. It's something that I can't explain. I share this with the men that when you're no longer afraid of emotion, you get to experience the sensation of life unlike you've experienced because your heart is opening and resonating and you're able to feel the true essence of life through your own experience. So thank you for the space and the questions and the energy that you brought that allowed me to also be able to feel into that.
No, it truly is soul chats. It's soul to soul conversation. And like you say, those expressions that come through, once we get used to it, it's almost like a frequency that's like of a higher octave than what the lower human version of us is used to. So it feels uncomfortable in the beginning when that high vibration of emotion comes through, that authentic emotion. But once you let that flow, once you're able to be the vessel and the conduit for it, it's like you say, it's such a profound way to live. And you get to be the conduit of it. You get to experience it. And it's like a gift that gets given to you.
It is, it's what I shared earlier on that wholeness will feel terrifying to the ego.
Mm,
So for me today, feeling that, I realized I've dissolved the ego or integrated the ego because there's no longer this fear of feeling love,
mm,
true love, not more
yeah.
what my template of love, which was deprivation, but actually true love through dissolving everything that I put in front of it. And it's nothing like it. And when you can feel it and you're no longer afraid of it and you no longer feel like you have to protect or guard from the loss or the abandonment or the rejection, you just give it in the world.
Mm,
Once you start giving it, that which you give, you receive, and it's unconditional. And doorways open and opportunities come, and you're no longer afraid to step into that space. And it takes courageous action for men to do it because you're going to go down a path that not one single person in your lineage has ever gone down. Just think about that for a second.
yeah, 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 yeah. Exactly. Exactly. That is it. That's it. And it's being that lineage circuit breaker. And this is the time for it.
And even as I look back and I realize my father went to religion, this is just some of that was his attempt at doing something different.
Yeah.
And I found a respect for him, even though there was a lot of hurt there as I worked through it, I found a respect because I was like, you know what? He was looking,
Mm,
and him looking led to a different path than all the family before you, which really was the opportunity because he handed the torch to you.
yeah.
And when you can see that everything was divinely set up for you to go down the path to learn what it is that you need to learn, all of those things, the respect and love I have for my father now, the respect and admiration and love that I have for my mother, even though she's not here, is greater than when she was.
Yeah. 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 You can see the journey now. Absolutely. Oh my God. I could carry on for another. This could be a Joe Rogan length version. Thank you so much. And I definitely hope to stay in your world and to engage with these sort of opportunities again soon because it's just amazing what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And once we move over to the Bay, I'll come catch up and have a coffee with you
Absolutely.
and meet you in person, Wendy.
Yeah, fantastic. Definitely.